And the other thing I always say to parents, because I went through this, is we cannot possibly know everything about our children's lives that they will then also know about themselves and their intuition about their future. We don't have that insight, they do. And all of us adults had feelings about, my life's gonna be like this, I'm gonna be like that. And our parents couldn't see that or know that. And so it's also hoping or understanding or being reminded that they see, they have a vision, they have a feeling about their lives that we couldn't possibly understand.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is the host of the Gabby Reece Show. She's a thought leader, a mother to 3 beautiful girls, a former pro volleyball player, and the wife to waterman Laird Hamilton. None other than Gabby Reece. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Bryce. How's it? I know you're in the middle of lots of action yourself, so I can't wait to see you try to pretend that you don't have chaos all around you for this next hour or so.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the best part is, you know how real and raw I am, so I won't even try to pretend. There is stuff everywhere. We are in the midst of a move for those of you listening. And I briefly mentioned that to Gabby offline, and she made this really profound comment that I'd love to start our conversation with today, which was, it's an opportunity to edit. I just love that you said that. Why did that come to mind?
Well, first of all, I'm a believer of, trying to always see what's on the upside of something that can be challenging, and moving is challenging. And I've moved quite a bit, and every time you realize it is a huge opportunity to, sort of continue to simplify. I would like to continue to simplify my life. That's what my hope is. And, it's harder to get into your stuff sometimes, the actual physical stuff. So every move is like, oh, this is an opportunity. Because I try to go through my house sort of every few months and scrape it from the stuff. Mm-hmm. But inevitably it piles up.
Yeah, I feel like we grow to expand the space that we have. And it happens every time, even though we tell ourselves we're not trying to do that, really.
Yeah. There's a great, very famous skit by George Carlin talking about that, where we move and then we move all our stuff to the next house because we've outgrown the small house because of our stuff. And then we pack it full of new stuff. And it's actually pretty accurate.
I can't help it, though. I have to blame you and Laird because I did put a sauna and a cold plunge at my house. So that's become, the monumental pain in the ass. And so it's definitely your fault.
I'll take it. I think, if you're going to have stuff, that's the good stuff to have. But yeah.
Absolutely. So
it's like anything. It's always, whatever's worth it is usually a pain in the ass.
For sure. That's a great way to describe it. And recently on your show, you had this great conversation around the element of struggle. And, there is no light without darkness. Our bodies and minds need to go through some of the muck and the challenge in order to experience the euphoria and the positive things. Will you touch on that a little bit? I feel like some of the amazing conversations that I just get the tip of the iceberg. I want to go a little bit deeper around this concept of this comfort crisis that we're seeing in our world.
Yeah, I think we live in a time where everything is at our fingertips. And, without going out and seeking destruction or destructive behavior or, like picking fights with lovers or, coworkers, it's in our nature to first of all, I think, even though we don't want the discomfort, we do need and want kind of the rub, if you will, the friction. Because I believe intuitively we understand that it's really the only thing that promotes us to growth. Growth does not happen from everything's cool. It just doesn't, unfortunately. And so how do we actively seek out things that maybe are challenging or uncomfortable, but not destructive ultimately to our life, to continue that growth? Because we have to almost consciously do it more now with the lifestyles that we have. You can order food and it gets delivered, and entertainment's as much as you want. And listen, relationships, communicating, listening, These things take effort, and sometimes they're boring. It's like, but these are the things that really make up our rich life. Same with training, the things that you talk about on your podcast and trying to eat in a way to support yourself. These things are, they have a longer dividend return, and they're sometimes, like I said, they're not shiny and like, wow, you're not getting dopamine from being like, oh, I ate all my veggies. And so I just think it's paying attention and learning and being beginners and doing things that we feel odd.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting the way you described how we crave friction, because I really do think that is absolutely necessary, but I've never really heard it said that way. It's almost like craving this discomfort for whatever biological reason. And you and Laird and the XBT crew are always so primal. Where did that thought process kind of come from? Did you develop that mentally through exploration, realizing like, all right, like when it comes easy, I don't really respect it that much. When I go through the struggle, I actually have like tangible skills, tools in my toolbox, memories, deeper, more like stronger relationships. Like, how did you kind of come to that conclusion?
I think there's a couple things about it though that I think are important to address, which is sometimes if things are status quo, that can be a great thing. Like, how do you also recognize in the simple, very quiet things that occur day to day, how do you get that satisfaction from that? Because when stuff isn't going well, if someone, touch wood, is sick or something happens, we're certainly aware of that, and we would pray for status quo at that moment, right? Mm-hmm. So I think first starting out and realizing the slowness of life, the breaking of bread, the commune with one another, within that, if we can notice, it doesn't be like, oh my gosh, this is so precious this time. I'm not talking about that. I'm really talking about an understanding, because you don't want it to be where you don't have that ability as well. So it has to be counterbalanced by the ability to feel and hear and see the very quiet nuance of the richness of kind of everyday life. Conversely, mm-hmm. I think living with Laird, quite frankly, for almost 27 years,
I can't help but smirk just when you say his name like that.
What do you mean? Well, it's so loaded. Laird means so many things, right?
Yeah,
to me.
Exactly. I just immediately think like curious, innovative troublemaker.
Totally. I mean, Dennis the Menace, there it is. I think
totally.
Living with Laird, I could have definitely hit a line and a track and just grooved out and been in a groove. And Laird has been just a really important beacon for me about paying attention also to who we are just physiologically, biologically, because then it gives us more tools to sort of navigate it, because we don't live in the natural way. It's not like we're animals where we have signals and they understand the language and there's no confusion, really. It's pretty clear. We live in a really confusing time and world. So we have to actively participate in, why do I have this impulse, and how do I make this impulse work for me or not give into this impulse or whatever's happening. And he does this certainly more fluidly than and I think that got baked into part of the roots of XPT. And then we've just been really fortunate to have other people that can, communicate that in their own way, like PJ Nestler or Mark Roberts, or people that we have the opportunity to work with, or Andy Galpin or whoever. So I guess it's, it's so simple and yet it's complex, right? Like nature.
And that's a great description, because you and Laird are so closely tied to the ocean. And it's like sometimes the ocean's crazy, it's volatile, waves are all over the place. Sometimes it's kind of chill and you're just kind of mastering the mundane. And then other times it's somewhere in between that. And, I'm sure there's varying levels based on that description as well. This episode is brought to you by MUSH. My friends over at MUSH created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And MUSH has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. MUSH started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com. Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. Two important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Smart Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes to their amazing gymnastics grips to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. But what's also so interesting, Gabby, is that, I don't know, I feel like as humans, we're trying to crave to make things meet our expectations. And what I mean by that is you and Laird had this really special conversation around navigating injury. And when things are mundane, people are trying to be disruptive and cause chaos rather than just being. And then when there's an injury, the narrative and kind of what we're taught is, oh, we need to manage the inflammation. We need to ice. We need to take Advil. We need to take NSAIDs. And you guys had this really, really cool, intimate conversation that I was fortunate to listen to around maybe the injury's supposed to be there. Maybe going back to our nature analogy, maybe it's supposed to be calm, or maybe it's supposed to be volatile right now. Maybe we're not supposed to wrangle it and try to control everything that's quite frankly a little bit out of our control. Will you touch on that a little bit in the art of just stillness or being?
Well, Laird has, been injured quite a bit. So I think he's you get philosophical, right? You either get nutty or you start to, it's funny how that is. I always think in a way that being philosophical or even having the moment to examine things is kind of an unusual luxury. And so his whole approach to injury, and I've had injuries as well, but not quite as many, not even close, is like, well, what is happening? Okay, so I'm here now in the healing. So what do I need to be doing to support the healing? But I can't mask the pain or the injury or the recovery process. And so I'll be in it. I'll be a compliant student. Because that's the other thing is if they say, hey, you have to be on the range of motion machine for 2 hours a day, then go on, if it's safe, for 3 or 4. So it's knowing when to lean into it and when to surrender to, this sucks, I'm scared, it hurts, it's not working right, and I'll do what I can and sort of ride this out. And I think the great thing about injuries or any kind of niggles, like just little this hurts and that hurts or whatever, that's when we go, oh, okay, I'm doing something that's not working. I mean, if you've had a catastrophic accident, that's one of those things. But usually it's the opportunity to say, I have certain habits that could be better, that would support my system, either for healing or performance. And I don't think we usually get there unless we don't feel good. And so every time, like I have a tear in my labrum right now, and it's been interesting because I've incorporated all these really annoying small little moves that have made my hip function, that I can train and do stuff. And I had about 8 months that I was having a hard time with that. So the other flip side of it is, until we're inconvenienced, generally, we don't raise our hand and say, okay, I'm willing to make a change. And we have been taught to be really afraid of pain and discomfort, right? Like pain became the whatever, fourth vital or whatever they call it. It's like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10 with the frown and the smile, how do you feel in your pain? And we've been really told as patients, oh, you shouldn't experience pain. Well, it's there to tell you something.
Yeah, we should really learn to listen to those whispers. And sometimes we're always trying to dance around them. But I really do think that injury is kind of the art for innovation. I was thinking about that as you were describing that, because, you know, I know you've been battling that labrum injury in your hip, and I've noticed you've been doing a lot more pool stuff, a little bit lower impact, and learning to, you know, navigate things in the pool through gentle innovation with the fins and pulling of things and pushing of things, which we're taught, oh, we just need to rest. You need to let the body heal, which an appropriate dosage of that may be, you know, integrated a little bit. But if that's all you do, it's like, if you don't use it, you lose it inevitably. And your tagline kind of on your podcast is, it's all an experiment. And I love that because in my humble opinion, that is science. It's questioning, it's curiosity, it's pushing of boundaries to then seek edges. Will you touch on your advice kind of around injury for people maybe navigating that world as to how they can safely and innovatively ask the appropriate questions to themselves, to others, to then try to kind of really seek their peak performance, really, rather than just kind of being a bump on a log, which is not fun for anybody?
Well, you know, first, of course, you know, obviously I'm not a doctor or an expert, but I will say that the first part for me, especially as somebody who is middle-aged, is at times, depending on where we are, like even at your age, even though you're very young still, you would maybe compare yourself to your 20-year-old self, and you'd say, well, I guess this is just how it is now, and I'm not going to be like that. And you won't be like that, but you could be better and different in certain ways. You know, will you be as ripped and lean or as explosive as when you were 18? I don't know. You know, it's like, so the number one thing is, first of all, don't compare yourself to your self from before, but also don't settle with like, oh, well, now I'm this age, or, oh, and so this is just how it is. Because yeah, it might take more effort to perform at a level you would like to, or to feel good, or to recover from hard training. That just might be a real kind of basic conversation around hormones and recovery and stuff that's really natural that none of us can really escape. So for me, it would be starting in your perspective, where it's like, don't fight it, but don't settle for it. Because fighting it has its own set of issues, right? Mm-hmm. It smells desperate. Yep. It's frustrating. It's like that Chinese finger handcuff where you just sit there going like this. It's like, don't do that. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't fight where I am, and then be your own best advocate. Because so with the hip, for example, I finally got an MRI. I finally went to the doctor, and the feeling I was getting, this is a doctor I trust very much, was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like the way to go. And so I had somebody from Colorado, a dry needler, simultaneously to being introduced to somebody who could work on me, simultaneously to actually getting Elliptigo gave me an electric stand-up slider, because they had runners that had been healing their labrums, and I have a hill. So it's very good for hills where you can work. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. Mm-hmm. But so keep the area strong without putting more torque on it, right? And so I guess what I would say to people is we get these injuries or these things, then we start to, I can relate to this. I've had knee issues, most of my adult life from volleyball. And it's like, we get this injury, we name it, we identify it, we move it in, it becomes a part of who we are. Instead of sort of saying, oh, well, this seems to be where I'm at right now. What are the things I can do to either improve it or sort of even maybe heal from it? And so this for me is not easy for myself to do. I understand it in theory, but when you're in the middle of something, and especially when you don't feel good, you do get scared, right? Like you think,
it almost
this
feels
is how
like a
it's going to be.
freedom is taken away. Like you're subtly not able to express yourself to your full capacity. And I'm
Right.
guilty as charged. I'm the guy that fights. And it wasn't until you and Laird threw me in the pool that I was like, oh, I can kick my ass in another way.
Well, and that's the other thing is keeping your mind open. Because for example, runners, like most people cannot really run past 35 years old, not like put the miles on, like real runners. And we can show you a million, case studies of it, and it's fine. So, we can't start to identify with these things. How do we just say, hey, I'm in a new place. I need new tools, new modalities. It's the same with relationships, with communication. It's not different with our physical practice. Is staying open and also offloading it. So if you are feeling scared or immobile or vulnerable, because we do, is telling somebody, hey, today I'm feeling really vulnerable. So it's not about walking through and being completely stoic all the time. It's about going, okay, this is how I'm feeling, back to business. What can I do to support myself and help myself, and staying open to new things? Not, hey, I tore my pec and I bang all this iron and I have all this stuff and I have compressed discs. It's like, yeah, well, you idiot. Like maybe stop heavy lifting and heavy squatting. Like, it's things like that because we get roped into it. Like, this is who I am. I do this. And it's like, yeah, great. How is that working for you? And so I guess, when people talk about surrender, this ability to surrender, there's a lot of ways that we have the opportunity to express surrendering.
I really love the way you describe that. It's this unique understanding of the deconstruction of identity. And in some ways in the world loves to define us by what we do, but what we do is just a small facet in who we are. And you've done a really good job kind of articulating this when you kind of were talking about the cost of winning with one of your podcast guests and what went into, making your professional volleyball career and some of the modeling and fashion endeavors that you were in pursuit of at the time. What would you describe on that front in relation to, the cost of some of these things and the deconstruction of identity based on title? Because at the end of the day, humbly, I love to describe myself as a professional mistake maker and a lifelong learner. And I kind of absorbed that by spending time with you and Laird, because being human is the one commonality that we all have, despite where we fall on lifestyle, habits, political beliefs, financial choices, all of those, nuances. What would you describe, Gabby, around this concept of being more human? And then we'll navigate later in the trickle-down effect around the cost of the pursuit of excellence in sport.
Well, I think for me, it starts with your essence, right? So a lot of times we are taught very early that our value is based on, okay, oh, you're such a pretty little girl. You run so fast. Oh, you have good grades, right? So we get taught very early that this is what we're bringing to the table. And ultimately, our humanity is the thing that we can house and nurture forever. And then the other things I think should be for us. So for example, you're alluding to an interview with Ken Steffes. If somehow, because the way I played volleyball, and I mentioned it in the conversation, were for very different reasons. Was I trying to win? Of course. But there were so many other things within my athletic soup that fueled me. So the camaraderie, the place to belong. I really respected myself for working that hard. I really, I go to practice and, get my ass kicked or go to a tournament and win or lose. I liked myself better because I also felt revealed. And I thought, oh, that's honest, right? Like you can't kind of fudge that. Where with Kent, maybe he was further in a different part of his journey. And so for him, and he's very analytical, he was deconstructing and saying, I'm here to win and the goal is to win. And if I don't win, I have to reframe this and such, right? So it was very different. However, let's say now, he's in a different part of his life. If that process for him enriched him in a way that he's like, okay, I did that. I understand that. It's given me something. I'm moving on. Perfect. If it's the thing that tortures him still 20 years later, oh, weren't you the guy that won that gold medal? And what are you doing now? And da, 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 da. That's not going to work. So I think even if you do it for different reasons, if your reasons are still for yourself, for your own, there's people, it's the pursuit of excellence. It's a quiet master that doesn't need to tell everyone like, oh, I'll tell you every person I know and every deal I've made. But maybe they are doing something at a super high level because they want to learn that. It stimulates them. It empowers them. Okay, I can close that identity door down. It's time to move on. And I'm good with that. I think that's, then it's okay. So if our reasons are for our own, and even if it's like, hey, listen, I want to kill it and make a lot of zeros. That's honest. But for people to understand, none of it is sustainable. Not being popular, not being the CEO, not being the winner. It just is not sustainable. And so it is a torture and like, what do they call it? The hedonic treadmill that you're never going to escape it. I don't care who you are. And when people talk about legacy, I want to laugh. It's like, who cares? Unless your legacy is that you helped other people. Great. So I knew that early. I grew up in the Caribbean. Nobody ever talked about being anyone, whatever that means. And so I don't think I ever bit that hook.
I think it's so important to understand that because it's so easy, especially in the social media world, to get looped into this status, right? Where do you fall in the pedestal? What level of respect am I going to give you based on, what you've done versus, I actually respect you because of, like you described, your essence or your consistent within your demeanor or how you treat other people or how you help other people. I always think it's so gratifying. And as I kind of alluded to before, it makes my heart sing, Gabby, when you guys just really talk about just authenticity and just vulnerability and being more human. Because around this time, Stoicism seems to be a very popular topic. And that doesn't make it wrong. Stoicism and the art of it practiced appropriately can be incredible. But always just not going to show emotion. I don't know how, like you said, sustainable that is.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate because for example, Laird is highly transparent and emotional. And I can articulate with my words a lot of thoughts and feelings, but my general demeanor is pretty stoic. And it was because of the way I learned to survive. And also my hope is to move more times than not in the right direction or the right reaction. So the stoic approach for me is also just taking a beat, creating space so that I really can respond in a way that I think will reflect how I'm feeling in the long run, not just in the moment. Simultaneously to when you're kind of getting your ass kicked in a real way and being like, I'm scared, this is hard, having that right situation, that right person, that right partner, that right friend that you can go, oh man, this is working me right now. So for me, it's always the blend. And listen, I can say that a lot of times I concealed my emotions because of fear. And I live with somebody who, right or wrong, they're willing to show you what they're thinking and feeling. And after time, I learned that there was a honesty or a bravery to that felt really compelling to me, especially as somebody who didn't have it so easily. So I think, and you realize also, by the way, we're all feeling a lot of the same things. So why would we not? And I don't mean circling the bowl. I don't mean going round and round and round and round about your feelings. Because at some point it's like, okay, cool. What do you want to do about it? Can you fix it? Can't you fix it? You got to ride it out. Like, what are we doing? But just being like, here's where I'm at. Okay, I'm going to dust myself up or get up and move towards what I think could be a solution, or at least making myself feel better to ride this out.
Mm-hmm. The idea that comes to mind is you don't have to truly listen to every single or maybe it's you don't have to believe every single thought. You can listen and you can acknowledge and wave hello, hey, I acknowledge your presence, said emotion, but you don't have to grasp onto it. You don't have to allow it to velcro to you. It's you acknowledge it, and then it's okay, let's create some solution based articulation around action here. And you definitely hit the nail on the head with the concept of the power of a beat. I call it the power of the pause. Just like in that stressful moment, just taking a second. In the CrossFit world, I always articulate it around like thrusters rather than like dumping the bar. Oh my gosh, get off of me. It's like, just leave it overhead for a second. Just, okay, now let's see where we're at. Just a quick little check-in with yourself. I think that's so masterful. And it's this, simply put, patience. But it's really easy to say, really hard to do,
Well, I have a selfish motive, which is I don't want to clean up. I don't want to apologize a bunch. And I don't want to spend a bunch of time now fixing something that I blew up some shit. And like, now I have to go back and like, oh, sorry. And, I have
it almost causes more problems in the long run.
I just don't want to deal with it. I'm always looking for like minimum impact. And I always tell my daughters that too. I'm like, that's why you avoid gossiping about somebody, because any chance you can to not create problems for yourself, it's actually very selfish. I joke a lot about this. I have one daughter in particular who, if I said to her, hey, listen, when you're polite to Bryce, it makes him feel so good. She'd go, oh, okay. I have another daughter who's very much like me. And if I said, your life will be better if you're polite to Bryce, and she'll go, oh, okay. And I'm geared like that. Like, I don't want to deal with a bunch of BS. I don't want to sit here and like blah, 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 and like apologize for a bunch of stuff, collateral damage that I created. And the other thing I try to teach them is, if you have a point, if you can execute it politely, you can keep your point. If you are disrespectful and rude, you lose your point. Now, because now you have to like apologize and discuss about your delivery and how you acted versus, hey, I have a real feeling about something and I need to talk about it, versus, no. I go, you're done. So try to figure that out.
It's so interesting that you say that. Is it the sheer controlling of stress and recognizing, okay, I'm stressed. It's probably not about that thing. It's probably something else. But then allowing yourself to hone in on that, get your breath a little bit low and slow, and then thinking, here's how I want to react. Here's how I probably should react or respond. And then realizing, maybe with a little bit of forward thinking, what's on the other side of that said action, and just realizing like the potential of each one. I think that's cool that you're teaching them those skills.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it works out. But it is funny. I will confess, though. So I do internally, make faces and swear at my family all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, one person will be 5 feet away from another person, but then they'll walk 10 feet in to come to me to say what's going on with that person 5 feet away. I'm like, okay, well, like, why don't you ask them? And so there, how it is. I mean, when you cohabitate, but I will confess that one particular daughter's at a phase right now that she can get me, like, or let me rephrase that. I allow myself to be gotten, because she'll like do stuff and I'll take 1 or 2 deep breaths and I'll take 2 more. And then literally, like the other day, I was like, get the fuck out of the car. Like, just go. Like, and that is not the way I want to respond. But sometimes, we're in these roles that you go, oh, I have so much more to learn, because how does she get me? I know it's coming. I know what's happening. It'd be like, you get it all laid out in front of you and you've got that opportunity. So I don't want to paint a picture like I'm never gotten. It's hard to get me, but I get gotten.
What are your thoughts on, like, in that type of moment? does it ever cross your mind around, I know I probably shouldn't say this, but by me reacting this way, it's teaching her a skill and it's teaching her how to navigate some of the stresses. So it's like you're allowing yourself to get gotten, but you're almost like a rubber band where it's like bouncing off of you back to her. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I would love to justify it with that. I think at that moment, I'm in my full humanness. And as a parent, I'm like, it's enough already. I don't have any more fancy words or explanations about why time is running out and you've asked to go to this appointment and now you're sitting here asking me, grilling me about another thing that you want to do or get. And now I'm going to act like I'm life and just be like, get out. You know, I mean, even when they were really little, because they're bigger now, when they were really little, I would try this and try that and try this. And then I'd say, okay, you know what? I'm going to stop talking to you like your mom, and I'm just going to tell you how it is straight. Because also they are going to go into the real world, and the real world is not going to act like their mother. And there's sometimes where I will say when I realize like it doesn't matter what I say, they have to learn how they're going to learn. That's just the way it is. And I will say, hey, listen, I'm bringing this up. I want you to hear it. You're going to do what you're going to do, and life will teach you. Because at the end of the day, I interviewed a gentleman named Robert Waldinger. He's the fourth head of the Harvard study. And we were talking about happiness and community and how chasing money doesn't make you happy and all these things that we all know, but we still do it, right? And I said, you know, Bob, are there just lessons in life that no matter how much we get the book, they give us the book, you know, how many ancient books are there? How many new books are there that just talk about what's really going to make you happy? But yet we still go along the track and work too much and do the things, right? And he goes, yes. I go, do you think there's just lessons that no matter how much we know, we're going to do it go through it ourselves? And he said, yes, Gabby, this is how we gain wisdom.
That's so profound. And you've talked about it a lot where you need to go to the school of doing because there's no going around it. And I can absolutely attest to that because I don't know, man, there's the learning in school, but then there's the application. And I've always learned better through the practical application and making mistakes and learning from those and continuing to make the same mistakes and beating myself up over it. What are your thoughts on this concept of doing and really overcoming, as Stephen Pressfield talks about, the resistance? Because that's typically the hard part, like just getting to the start. And then once you start, you kind of can build some momentum, even if it's in the wrong direction.
Yeah, oftentimes the wrong direction is, you know, we joke, sometimes you learn as much how to be by not how not to be, right? And yeah, I think, you know, we're here to live and participate. And if we can throw our hat in the ring and give it a go, especially when we're called to. I think a lot of us look at situations and even relationships, and I don't mean always intimate, I just mean friendships, where we think, oh, that's something that interests me. And we hold ourselves back, or we're for our myriad of reasons of being scared, you know, scared of failure or being embarrassed or people not accepting us or whatever the reasons are. And I think half of it is just being willing, like you said, just to, you know, get involved, throw your hat in there and give it a go, because it's never usually as scary as we make it out to be. And Laird says something that I think is important. If you're talking about like maybe somebody wants to take a dance class, let's just say like, I want to learn how to tango or ballroom dance, or I don't know, or try a new sport. There's only one first day. And so we just got to get through that first day. There's only one of those. There's only one first day. It's easier. The brain then and the nervous system will go, I at least know what to expect now. I mean, I at least understand some of the rules of engagement. And so, you know, he wholeheartedly has no problem with the first day.
For sure. I know you have a lot of experience in your past interviewing and communicating with so many people in your journey so far, but do you ever go back to some of the early podcasts and you're like, oh my gosh, who was I back then? Like I've evolved and navigated so much.
You know, I don't listen to anything old. I started doing television interviews in 1992. And when they pop up, somehow somebody sees them. It was I was on a show called MTV Sports. My voice was quite a bit higher. And, I was a 22-year-old young, girl, professional athlete. Those are kind of entertaining and amusing. But as far as the podcast, I don't really listen to the old interviews. One thing that I've learned too about doing it is, you got to learn from what you're doing. So that's important. But you can't. But it becomes disingenuous when you're trying to construct it. Like, look silly, be honest, miss opportunities. Like, I should ask questions that I didn't or whatever, and just be like, oh, okay, that's going to make me maybe more alert for the next time.
That's a big one. Like, I've done that in the past where I'm like, oh, I should have asked that. But I was like, that's not where the conversation went. If I had a conversation with them at a coffee shop or on the beach or wherever, you just go with the conversation. You don't typically leave those conversations as if, oh, what if? And it's so interesting how we play these games in our head a little bit. It's very fascinating to me.
Well, the other part of it is I really want to do a good job. Like when I do the interview for the listener, like you're doing right now, you want to honor the ear space and time of the people listening. And I want to do a good job and do all my homework with, the people I'm talking to, so they know I'm vested and I honor their time as well. And then after that, it's like, what are you going to do? It's like, do the best you can. I mean, if somebody writes a book, believe me, if they come on my show, I've read the book. And I'm trying to think about real tangible takeaways for the audience. I'm not trying to dictate what they are. I'm just hoping to sprinkle them throughout. And after that, it's like, I'm not that important. Nobody really gives a shit. It's like, and I think that's then the flip side. Show up, take it really serious, work really hard at it, and then let it ride. Yeah.
I love that advice. And I love that you touched on the prep work too, because I'm always the pen and paper guy. Like, I like writing stuff down. I'm a huge believer that like writing fills the gaps within my thinking. And what's so interesting is kind of just flipping through some of these little scratch papers. Humbly, I've personally learned so much. I've realized that it's a little bit of a selfish endeavor too, because I feel like I'm getting an MBA talking to people way smarter than me. And it's so cool because I hope that other people are accumulating all that knowledge, and whatever tools resonate with them, take what they need and leave the rest. And you're doing such a great job on the Gabby Reece Show. What would you say are some of the top or most tangible things that you've acquired as far as tools in your toolbox along your podcasting journey so far?
Well, let's say from the science or biology part, I think I just have had the opportunity to cross-reference a lot of things. And when they 4 or 5 or 10 times keep showing up, for example, recently I learned typically women don't eat enough protein, and fasting actually isn't great for them, especially performance women. So I think as somebody who was trying to fast, intermittent fasting and doing all these things, that was one thing where I was like, oh, I need to eat 1 gram of protein per my ideal body weight per day when I can, if I can. And if I have to supplement with branched chain amino acids, I will. And maybe because Laird is fasting doesn't mean I have to fast. So I think that's one example of when you interview enough people and they're all saying the same things, about glucose spikes or, obviously everyone's always talking about inflammation, but mitochondrial function and just certain things that you go, hey, these show up over and over and over, microbiome health and all of these things. How do we support this and say them in different ways so that people can hear it and not the same? So selfishly. And then on the personal side, it's just talking to people that, as you know, they inspire you and they reinforce things that you might know, but they bring it to top of mind. So you go, oh, you know what? I have to do that better. And there's been so many, people. I interviewed Stephen Mitchell, who translated or he did actually a different interpretation. I shouldn't say translated. The Tao by Lao Tzu.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, and I interviewed him with Rick Rubin, which was interesting because I asked Rick Rubin, how do you master your environment without force? Because he does. And I've been friends with him a long time. And he gave me that book. And I had already read the book, but I thought, oh, so I interviewed them together and
That's
talked
fun.
about the book. But just someone like Stephen, who is very quiet and unassuming and would be, I don't want to say easy to overlook, but sometimes when people aren't noisy, you have to lean in. And these are people who've done a lot of work and read a lot of books and have done tons of meditation. And it's having that opportunity to be reminded, re-inspired, and re-educated about maybe better ways to approach things in life.
Yeah, I definitely think the verbiage and the language factor play a huge role, because what I say and what you hear could be two different things. And if somebody else says something in a different capacity, it may resonate or stick. And I forgot who said it, but somebody said it on one of our conversations around the concept of language as an approximation of what we're actually trying to convey. And when you think of it like that, it almost elicits a metaphor of hieroglyphics and trying to understand maybe another language for people that have traveled to other countries. You're reading body language and you're trying to understand facial expressions and the energy and frequency. But it is very cool that, you're connecting with so many different people. And then through your cross-referencing, you're able to hold on to pattern recognition and realize, okay, this is a little red flag in my head. I'm understanding this. Let's bring that to the forefront a little bit. And like you said, lean into that a little bit. What are your thoughts on, we see it a lot now. It's on the cover of so many different like fitness magazines, like do these 3 things and you'll get 6-pack abs. But then when you look at it, it's like correlational studies that aren't really like double-blind placebo. Like, how do you help digest personally and also educate people around not just believing everything that says study?
Well, yeah, especially now more than ever, right?
For sure.
Don't it's only on mice, people. It's not on people. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's I think discernment, but what I always say is consistency. No absolutes, right? There is, when people are like, it's an all or nothing, when it comes to nutrition or movement or spiritual practice, if they go, this is the way, it's like, oh, run for the hills. Mm-hmm. So first of all, you want to give people, say, you be your own best advocate. Number 1. Number 2, go with a discerning eye. It doesn't mean not open. It just means pay attention. Don't just take everybody at their word. Consistency is always going to be king, no matter what. Whatever practice you're doing in movement or in food or a breathing or meditative practice, it's not going to be about type or length. It's going to be about consistency. And then finally, reminding people there is never a magic bullet as much as we would like it. There's no quick fix. And so if some study is showing up going, these short things or these 3 things, those 3 things for when and what time of the year and how old are you and how many? And then what are you going to do after that? When it gets dark and cold, what are you going to do? So it's like, it's sort of just, weirdly having a very 30,000 foot view of things. And then if something has some substance and meat, then go ahead and dive in. But one study is not going to, reinforce or change something. I mean, I do appreciate how, for example, forever and ever, cholesterol was, connected to heart and heart health. And if you really pay attention now, they'll say, oh, it's not really a good litmus for, and then it's like, oh, well, your cholesterol, but which particle is it? Do you have large particle size, high numbers, or small particle size numbers? So it's also getting people to understand that there's some shenanigans that go on, and be careful and go back to a more natural approach, a natural state. Don't be quick to take one thing to fix one thing that has 17 other possible issues. What are the things we can do that the downside would be less than nothing or it didn't work? Mm-hmm. Then let's talk about that. That could be cool. And And I always like really old practices, Chinese medicine and herbs and things that are slow. But if they think they're going to take a bullet and, hit the bullseye and it's all going to be solved, generally that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's so interesting to have these questions because typically the answer is it depends, which creates so much confusion for people. But at the root cause is really leaning into being as natural as possible. And I know that's a very broad and inclusive, vague statement, but what I mean by that is the way you described integrating movement and nutrition with the seasons. And I don't just mean winter, spring, summer, fall. I also mean the busy seasons of work, maybe when you need to travel for your kids' sports or when school's a little bit busier. There's varying seasons within our own individual lives as well. And, stressful seasons, okay, maybe we don't need as long of workouts and, as much starchy carbohydrate within our system because we're going to be training a little bit less. And understanding that it's not, this is the answer, do it this way. It's, well, it depends. Where are you at that day? Let's ask the appropriate questions and then consider the wide array of variables. Will you touch on that a little bit, Gabby, around integrating this with seasons? Because it's hard for people to put a grasp on that. But kind of if you watch like bears, for example, there's certain times where they hibernate and there's other times where they're fishing for salmon.
Yeah, I think, we get so disconnected to our environment. And so even the length of the day and the sun, of course, we're going to have less energy on colder, shorter, darker days. So how do we support ourselves then? And you said it. So for example, holiday season is very stressful. So right before Thanksgiving, all the way through to the new year, everyone is completely upside down, right? You're dealing with the holidays and you're winding up if you have a kid in school and then, it's another year's gone by. So I believe it's a very reflective time. You might have family visiting, which then creates a different kind of layer, maybe stress. And then you're dealing with like Christmas parties, Christmas consumption, all of these things. Maybe it would be better to be walking and doing a breathing practice and, hitting resistance training once a week and also figuring out a strategy. So I know I have all these parties where I don't drink alcohol, but even understanding like, what am I in for and how do I navigate this? Not just kind of free falling, jump out of the plane and be like, I'll work it out on the fly. And so I think it's honoring yourself and how you think, honestly, how you think you're going to feel, not how you think you're supposed to feel. Mm-hmm. And also even doing a little bit of homework. I think it's important for people to pay attention because you can find so much information, real information in books on even certain spices and herbs and things to be eating during certain cycles of the year that support your health better. I think people good for that is like, I think actually Dr. Axe does a pretty good job, but really any, kind of herbalist or Chinese medicine book will give people this information where you go, hey, I'm going to be more mindful of using this spice more often this time of the year. And then being willing, though, to force yourself out of that calm state. Like, okay, listen, hey, it's time to get going. Like the days are warming up and it's longer and we've got to generate some energy. How are we going to do that? But it goes back to don't BS yourself and also understand that we have to do a little bit of participating to not only get educated, but then to get creative. How do you create the plan? Whether it's the food plan or the moving plan, you have to get creative. So it's not going to happen on its own. But to consider yourself a part of nature. We are nature. It is us. And for us to deny that because we're in a skyscraper, we're doing a disservice to ourselves.
For sure. I also think just the integration of convenience. The more convenient you make some of these things, the more consistent the application. And that holds true with movement, that holds true with nutrition, trying your best to keep the bad things out of the house. And now those things are inconvenient. I think that's a great rule of thumb. Proactive thinking, I think, is really helpful. Before you go to the party, maybe you integrate a little bit of protein, prior to leaving. So that way you're not eating a bunch of the sweets and the garbage and then paying the price on the back end. And really just taking a deep dive to think, question. Practice the art of trial and error, live and be the experiment, as you talked about before, and just understanding the role that you play in that season. I'd like to take a moment to thank our friends over at Vuori. They are bringing a new perspective on performance apparel. Their products are incredibly versatile and allow for freedom and flexibility in any arena. As humans, we are complex creatures, always on the move and always on the go. Allow Vuori to join you as you navigate the complexities of the human experience. Whether you are training, adventuring, lounging, traveling, or attending meetings, Vuori has options to suit your active lifestyle. My personal favorites are the men's core short and their line of Ponto performance products, which are so incredibly soft. Check these guys out over at vuori.com/Invictus Mindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. That's VUORI.com/Invictus Mindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. Everything they have is designed to work out in, but doesn't look or feel like it. It's so freaking comfortable that you won't want to wear anything else. Breathing, movement, circulation, digestion. What do all these body functions have in common? Our muscles. There are over 600 muscles in the human body that are responsible for supporting our daily activities. That's why your muscle health is incredibly important. On this podcast, I always discuss seeking our peak expression and striving to maximize our human potential. And so I try to share with you the top products that I find on the market. MyHMB is a clinically proven ingredient that has been shown to help build and maintain lean muscle mass, increase strength, improve recovery, and enhance body composition. Learn more about your muscle health at myhmb.com/Invictus. Once again, that's myhmb.com/Invictus. Enhance your muscle health and enhance your life. And Gabby, you had this really awesome thing. I loved it. I hope I don't bastardize it here, but you talked about the roles that we have in relationships and how sometimes you're behind and you're playing the role of supporter. Sometimes you're alongside and you're playing the role maybe of like a co-pilot. And then sometimes you're in front and you're the leader and maybe you leave the troops behind temporarily. Will you talk about that? I loved the way you described that because sometimes there's this narrative around, oh, I wear the pants in the relationship. And it's like, well, maybe you do sometimes, but it needs to be practiced back and forth in order for things to really work based on the season.
Yeah, I think I was talking about being willing to be behind, like support my children and support Laird, and maybe he has a crazy week and work or a dream or whatever it is, and then there are times, not so much with my children, but a little bit now that they're getting older, where it's like, hey, I'm just here. I can be a confidant. I don't actually need to tell you what I think. So there'll be times even with my girls when I'm on the side, if you will, and I'll ask permission if they're sharing something, if I can ask a question. I don't just project all my opinions. So it's also honoring them in those times. And then, and of course with Laird co-piloting, we do that quite a bit in parenting and in work and such. And then, sometimes going in the front and saying, I need this, I need to do this. And at that moment, maybe I'm always going to be their mom and his wife, but I have, you guys are, I got to bail on you and go out in front and just do whatever it is. And it's either to bring them along or it's to get done something that I need to get done for myself. And then I can fall back, right? I can go back into behind and on the side. But being willing, and I think without over generalizing, for women that's harder to do, especially when you have a family, because you're so afraid to break out in front and to say I'm doing this or I need to do this, especially when you're naturally feeling to always be behind everybody. I feel like it's even more positive when your nature is to be behind and pushing up everybody and elevating everybody, because at the end of the day, family living is complex and it is something that can be hard on everybody, right? Every kid will tell you what they was hard about their parents, and then partners will talk about what could have been tricky dynamics. And so what I'm trying to hope for or avoid is getting spit out of this process thinking, oh, I wish I had done that and this and that. So how do I balance it? And it's certainly not easy. It takes effort and work, but then it's at times giving yourself that permission to say, I'm going to go in front, and then go back to service again to the group, or at times just be together and the side by side. Let's all be together.
I think it's incredible that you notice this and you practice the art of variability and adaptability, because so often we just accept a role and then we stay there, and then the relationship gets stuck and, like you described, the fishbowl, and doesn't really evolve. And in this day and age where everybody's a brand, everybody's got a product that's evolving, and you guys have the incredible Laird Superfood XPTs getting up and going with their retreats and events, and some cool things in the works. How do you guys practice, you guys being Laird and you, the art of this ratio between hanging out, intimacy, play, and not always getting stuck in being roommates and business partners, which I think is very common for a lot of couples these days. And it's important to have conversations and dialogue around this.
I'm going to give a lot of credit to Laird on this because, this is complex. And remember, we've been in a long relationship. So some people may not be at this place, or they may not agree necessarily with the dynamic, but I'll just share it with you. So within the coupletum, the romance, right? Laird is probably the ultimate gatekeeper of that. His ability, he brings a masculinity that brings out the femininity in me. And people, they don't know me, they don't realize I would actually much rather function in a masculine way. I'd rather get things done. I'd rather be working. The list is long. And it's also where I hide, right? I like to hide in that. So here I have this person that I admire and love, and I feel very passionately about, that projects this energy towards me that brings this other side of me out. It didn't happen easily. It was like, oh. And so I believe in that realm, he sets a tone. And all I need to do, if I'm willing and it feels right, which I do, is show up that way. And so it would mean taking on the feminine energy. It's also that I speak to Laird. I always have said this many times. I am nicer to no one than I am to Laird. It's like, it's just an understood dynamic. Like, hey, I'm going to bring this frequency, and hopefully you would feel the same way. Like, it's your job to take care of your side of the street, which means speaking to one another respectfully, kind of trying to listen. I joke that if I can't give 100% to Laird if I'm working and on the phone, unless I know it's a kid question, I don't even answer the phone. Because unless I can give him my attention, I don't bother. So it starts, let's break it up. It starts with each of us taking care of our own selves and needs first. And then sort of saying, like, I'm not looking for you to make me happy. That's not your job. Then coming into the partnership for me, it's got to be the romance first. Otherwise, why bother? I would like to have that with this one person. And so there's this sort of tenderness place that we can express those types of feelings. Great. Then it moves, right? It moves into business, and it moves to, hey, I trust you to take care of this. Oh, you're trusting me to take care of that. And then trying to find the way to honor each other in there. And if there's healthy debate. And then finally, you talk about all these buckets of like fun and work and this and that. I would be the one who tends to want to work too much, and he's the one who's better about living life. And so there's a balance in there. And both of us are hardwired to understand naturally the importance of the relationships, the time to to be together, the time to break bread. Doesn't mean really extravagant things that, big trips and things like that. It's shared conversation and connection and slowing things down while everything else is kind of going crazy. And so I think for both of us, the thing that we hold most important after taking care of our own personal needs, because otherwise you're good for nothing. And that doesn't mean, of course, you're going to elevate your kids. You're going to take care of what needs to get taken care of. But it's really saying, checking in with yourself, who am I, what I need, is second, is knowing for sure that the time in connection with each other and our family and our friends, it ends up being the most valuable thing. And it's at a cost. It takes extra energy, and maybe you're not crushing it quite the way you could in work. So, but it's the price, it's the thing. And both of us can arrive at that on our own.
I also think it comes down to, who do you want in your boat? And are you both willing to put in your effort to have that thing moving in the direction that you choose? And I just really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's great advice for people navigating relationships and business. And, very similarly, your girls are getting older. Parenting is, there's no beautiful roadmap for parenting. There's peaks, there's valleys, there's everything in between. There's right, there's wrong, and there's just the art of practicing and managing guilt when we do things the wrong way, which I'm sure a lot of people manage. You talked about, not just specifically to your children, but just in general, children don't always listen, but they're usually watching. And you have this unique curiosity around, what are they thinking? And then maybe trying to zoom out to, what was Gabby thinking when she was their age? Mm-hmm. And there's so much unique perspective there, where it's almost like you're watching yourself and you're watching them from a bird's eye view. You're watching from being in the moment, but then you're also watching it like it's a movie.
Well, and you have to, right, to keep your sanity, but also weirdly parenting simultaneously to being completely in it and being with all the natural concerns is also to be above it with faith in your children, faith in life, and that these phases, why we're reacting is because we think, oh, this is how their life's going to go. And right now they're an unlikable 4-year-old, or really kind of almost sometimes like erratic teenager, or what, what's going on. But if you just take a moment, and certainly I can recall, even though it was many years ago, oh yeah, in certain ways I was like way worse, and why would it be okay that I had to go through that, but they don't? And why would I think it would be different? And also, it's not that it worked out for me, but I don't have that behavior in my adult life, and I have some pretty good habits. So I think it's giving them that room, because what also you learn, but also remember, I'm on the third one, is pushing against it doesn't help really. Making room for them to get through it, they actually get through it pretty quickly. And so why put up the resistance, and believe in them. Believe in that they're going to arrive at a place that they'll make the right and healthy decision for them. And that it still might be different than what you do, but it's still going to be something that makes it work out for them. And the other thing I always say to parents, because I went through this, is we cannot possibly know everything about our children's lives that they will then also know about themselves and their intuition about their future. We don't have that insight, they do. And all of us adults had feelings about, my life's going to be like this, I'm going to be like that. And our parents couldn't see that or know that. And so it's also hoping or understanding or being reminded that they have a vision, they have a feeling about their lives that we couldn't possibly understand.
The art of parenting is just, you make it sound so magical, which is cool. And I love that it's an adventure that you and Laird kind of go on together versus, placing insurmountable expectations on things. It truly is an experiment, and it's cool to see you navigating those waters. And the other thing I want to chat about, and you do this with your children as well, but last time I was at your house, I noticed something that was really, really, really impressive. And that's not enough reallys. And that was, Laird was in the pool and we were kind of playing with some dumbbell things. And your daughter jumped in and she was like, Daddy, play Marco Polo with me. He stopped everything and we started playing Marco Polo with her. It was absolutely incredible that he made the time to do that. And I honored and appreciated and just read the situation. I was like, I want to play too. I'm going to be a part of this. But then simultaneously, you were kind of playing a little bit of host and like making sure we were okay there. But then for some friends like came by, I don't know if they drove by or they were riding a bike, and you paused and you made time to then connect with them. And for people like yourself, like Laird, where everybody wants access to you all the time, you know, people are asking you for podcasts, you've got appearances, you've got business calls, you have everything under the sun that is pulling at your attention. Gabby, how the hell do you make time to connect with so many amazing people and maintain this unique, calm ethos within those connections without being standoffish, like, hey, like I got to do this other thing? Like, I am just so curious and blown away because I never forgot that. I left that day being like, these people are wizards.
Well, listen, we've been doing this a long time, number one. Number two, when you say yes, you said yes. And also, I'm not really hiding anything. I you know, if you see me, I'm not, obviously I have private corridors that are for, you know, certain situations, but I'm not really hiding anything. So I don't have to put a character on per se. Now, you know, I was talking to Brett Bartholomew recently about different masks for different situations. So when I'm in a business mode, I have one mask. When I'm, you know, with human beings, but I think it's this. I'm well aware that I'm fortunate to get to do all of the weird things that I have as a living. And when people talk about the practice of gratitude, the best way I can think to show that rather than in words is to show up in a way that seems to understand that about how fortunate I am, and not to lose sight of that. If I lose sight of that, then I'm clear that on the other side of something will be a really uncomfortable lesson. Going back to my original thing, which is I'm also looking, I don't need to learn the new rules of the universe. I understand that if I can be gracious and present and diligent and disciplined, that in the end, it will be probably better for me. And so I think, and I've had practice, and I would like to say one thing too, leaving the parent conversation about making it sound like magic. Be clear. I have had to go through some things as a parent that I had a choice to learn or not to learn. And they were very uncomfortable, very scary, and very hard, truly. And so I want to be clear that the only reason I can sound like that now is because I have really gotten it handed to me that I had a choice to make. So, because I would never want anyone to be going through something and think, how is that possible? It's like, no, I got forced into that framework, you know, perspective. And Laird said something once, we were going through something with one of our daughters. And, you know, we go, what school are they going to go to? Are they going to play sports? And all this bullshit that we do. And we were in such a thing with her. He was like, you know what, just make it to 25. And at some point in parenting, sometimes it's just that. Just make it. Just pull it. Just survive it. Whatever, you know. And so I want to really isolate that because it's hard enough as it is. So please, I don't want anyone to think that I sort of landed on some philosophy that's just so smart. It's not. It was earned in a hard learned way. And that's why I can
think though it's the courage to know that. It's the courage to know that it's going to be hard, that you're going to screw up, that you're not an expert, that you're not always going to say and do the right thing, but you are always going to consistently attempt to show up as your best self in that moment. And that's what I observed from the two of you. And I loved the clarification there because, you know, I think sometimes people have this image in their head of, oh, those people do it way better than me. And they don't really understand the psychological warfare that goes on sometimes in the art of making something look whether the term is easy or beautiful or whatever that is. And I just love that you are able to articulate that and really make it relatable for people in their parenting journey.
Well, yeah. And by the way, you might have a kid that is radical and they're going to use that as adults in some extraordinary way. And to raise them and parent them is the worst. And so it's also understanding, like, I don't have compliant children. So the story is, so it's only partially told. And so I guess there's going to be somebody like someone will have some kid and they'll be like, she has so much perseverance. Well, you know what that looked like when she was 11 or 12, whatever. So I think it's also reminding people, hey, we just don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think the concept that you described too around belief, if I can reflect back on my parents, I screwed up a ton, but I always felt their belief. It wasn't just said, but I could feel it. And, I'm not a parent, just a dog dad over here, but I really do think there's something to that. Just being able to feel the support, it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be from a family member, a friend, or a loved one. But I think there's this uniqueness around feeling like you have a home. And I think Tiger Woods described it, where I think he had a bad course one day and his dad said, hey, no matter what, I'll always love you. And I think Kobe's father articulated that too. Kobe had a summer where he scored like 0 points in all of the games, cumulative total early on. And his dad said, hey, I don't care how many points you score. I'm always going to care for you. I'm always going to be here for you. And that eternal belief, I think, is so invaluable to give kids the courage and the bravery to explore and push those edges, knowing that, hey, if I screw up, it's okay.
Yeah. And we can't do anything in life without failing and screwing up multiple times. And also, as a parent, we are handed a child with unlimited possibility. And then what happens is we start to realize most of the stuff doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. Like, once we grow up a little bit as parents and we start to go, does it really matter? Does that really matter? Does this really matter? No, that most of it doesn't. And it's an interesting kind of cathartic process to go through, and that they're different and they're going to have, different ideas and different kinds of jobs than you thought or whatever. And so I guess, it's such a beautiful and challenging role. And I would never have the heart or the audacity to go, let me tell you, mm-hmm. how to do it. I have no idea.
For sure. I'm at an age right now where a lot of my friends are having kids. And I love listening to their experiences because there's so many rules and regulations. Do it this way, do it that way. Do you spank? Do you not spank? The 0 to 5 are the foundational formational years as well. And just listening to the contrary and all the different narratives that are coming and floating to the surface around the rights and the wrongs. I'm sure some of it holds tremendous value. And then, like you said, some of it, it's like, I don't think it really matters, but maybe some of it is very, very important and meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, we like to think as parents, like, we really have this great impact. I just feel like sometimes our impact is only really if we screw it up.
Totally. On that same front, a lot of my friends are asking all the questions around what does pre-training look like for somebody that's like early stage pregnancy and kind of getting ready to go through that journey, and then what does postpartum training look like? There's not a ton of knowledge out there on it. I recently connected with a woman named Brianna Battles around it. If you haven't spoken to her, she'd be a great guest for your show as well. And just trying to create more education and conversation around this topic, because obviously it varies on the individual, but I just wish there was a little bit more information to help support people in their journeys, whether that's behind, alongside, or in front.
I think with pregnancy, I on my last pregnancy, I actually did a real-time fitness program that was ACOG approved, which is the American Gynecologist, group organization. And I did it with a gentleman named Mike Monroe. And we did like first trimester, second and third. And I was in real time. I was a little further ahead. Because this is what I want to say first, is if somebody has, like, I had a pretty rigorous fitness schedule in my pregnancies, but I was coming from a rigorous fitness life. I would never encourage a woman when she finds out her pregnant, like, oh, I'm going to get in the shape of my life. It's like, yeah, no, that's not what's happening. So I really want people to forget, or they'll say, I'm getting so fat. Well, no, you're pregnant. So I really, first off, is the point of entry. What I would say that seemed helpful is I don't give in to every craving, because you pay. You either pay up front or you pay in the back. And so, gestation, diabetes, like all these things, because if you can just not eat the ice cream, that might support your pregnancy overall. And the other thing is, could you find a healthy way to sweat, given all the variables? So let's say somebody isn't too nauseous, or they don't have a special circumstance where they have to be sedentary. Because what happens is, like, for example, I never had swollen feet or ankles. I spun, not hard, but I'd go to spin class. Like, I'd walk in, they'd be like, oh my God, you're still coming. Like, what's going on? At one point I couldn't even bend over the bike because my stomach was so big. My knees would hit so I had to sit up, but I could get a sweat without impact, and it didn't hurt my pelvis too much. Cause it's a lot of weight. I had 9-pound babies, and towards the end, the last few weeks, your pelvis is, there's a load in there. So I found the ways within my realm and scope to keep moving. So if people are already moving, do modified versions of that. I have heard many times that lat pull downs, weighted from a pull from above your head, is not great, especially as the child develops, because of the umbilical cord. So I do know that. But we can move. Like, I was very mobile. And so it's not a time, if you're feeling good enough, okay, I honor anyone's experience, you got to keep moving. Because then when you have your baby, for me, within a week, I besides having like loose stomach skin because you just stretched out, I was kind of back to, you would think, it was pretty reasonable pretty quickly, because the body's meant to do it. So if you don't have complications, take the opportunity to move. And if you can fight the cravings, try to do it. And then the other thing that happens, especially a first-time mother, they give you a baby, they send you home. You don't know how to do it, but your instincts help you. Is the best thing we could do is try to figure out when we can start to move again safely, because everything is different. So how do we get self to be someone we recognize? I know it sounds weird, and this is a moment that I would say, even if it's for 8 minutes or the kid's taking a nap, 15 minutes, get in front, go out in front. Because if I can find myself, I can tether this whole life change to something I can identify, which is me. A lot of what happens sometimes, you have this baby and all of a sudden you don't even look like yourself or feel like yourself, and now you have this person that you have this uncontrollable amount of love for and vulnerability. And if you're nursing and you're dynamic with your partner and no time and all these things. So I would say, the ACOG is an organization that gives you parameters. They could be too conservative from my point of view. And there's trainers who really understand how to work with them, but to just keep moving. And the minute that you are cleared to move, and understand, if your baby naps for 30 minutes, don't clean the house. It would be better to spend 15 minutes doing something for yourself. Because that's what we do. We try to get back to even. I tidy up, I do a load of laundry, I do all this stuff. Great, do it after. Do it with the kid strapped on you. Do that with them awake. If you've got that time, take care, because it's all wonky. And for guys, what I want to say to them, and I've said this many times, do not treat your partner, how's the little mama doing? Don't do that, because she's already in it. So treat her. I always say to Laird, treat me like your girlfriend. Like, in that moment, I need you not to be like, how's mommy feeling? F off. I'm not your mommy. I'm the baby's mommy. I'm your partner. So, like, take the baby. Let me take a shower. Like, those kinds of things are more helpful than, the other stuff.
Knowing when the appropriate action can step in to take a load off of you temporarily.
Yeah.
And then also ensuring that you feel sexy and appreciated and nurtured in that moment based on the physical and potentially mental and emotional trauma that kind of just took place, which is absolutely incredible that women are able to do that. You guys are so much tougher than us.
Well, it's just different, right? And I think too, it's like, look in my eyeball. Like, I am connected to this child because I am nursing them and being here, but simultaneously, I am still just a person. And if there were times throughout the week that I could be identified by someone I really care about and respect, in my eyeballs, like, I see you, there you are, I can get back to my very, coveted job of being completely physically and emotionally available for this other being.
I really honor that, Gabby. I think there's some cool nuggets that new parents and current parents can take with them based on that dialogue. And kind of pivoting a little bit, you guys are evolving your businesses. These things, almost from my perspective, look like they've gone off a launching pad, and that being Laird Superfood and XPT. What roles do they play in your day-to-day, and how do you find time to water and nurture and foster both of those?
Well, we've been very fortunate with these businesses. We've had other failures in the past, so I just want to remind people that, again, forward-facing isn't always a representation of how things got there. And so Laird's Superfood was taken public in September of 20. And so we have a more recent, in the last few months, a new CEO and a new CMO, because who builds a business is not usually the one who runs the business. And there's been a real education and, again, ass kicking that when we went public, it was a good time in the market, and now it's a tougher time in the market, but the product does very well. And so our job is to pay attention to ingredients, innovation of product, marketing as far as with our own images, that it stays true to who we are. And after that, I sort of always say, whatever happens is fine. Let the adults run the business, but we really are the gatekeeper for the ingredients. There's a lot of conversations, like, you have no idea, where, food scientists can say to you, hey, if you don't put enough in, you don't even have to put it on the packaging. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not what we're doing. So it's just being diligent there, and in marketing, staying true to kind of how we feel that we want to portray ourselves. And that business is doing very well, and the product's very good. And then XPT is different. It was done with, we then had a group come in and invest. So it's the same thing. Innovation, adding new curriculum. Director of programming is PJ Nestler, who is brilliant. So we really have lucked out because, he's certainly smarter than Laird and I. And Laird is free to continue with his curiosity. And for us to keep paying attention to what we will incorporate and test in our own home. And if it keeps showing up as viable, then we might incorporate it into XPT and meet with PJ. So again, it's always about communication, how we want to communicate, and about what the content is. And after that, it's like, get out of the way.
Let the business people be the business people.
Yeah, absolutely. But it takes time. I mean, these companies take time, and but again, when you've had ones that didn't work, you understand, do what you got to do to take care of the ones that actually have a chance to work.
Yeah, you definitely learned through doing. And, I love that line too, the company or the person that gets you from A to B. If you're trying to go from B to C, you may need to pivot that. And that's challenging sometimes in business, because you may need to change your course, move in a different direction with leadership. And it's very hard. But I guess my question for you, Gabby, is how have you and Laird got to the point where there's eternal trust within the business world? You know, I view business as war without bullets a little bit. And once transaction and money gets involved, there's definitely a skewing of the brain sometimes. And I'm always very curious, you know, you guys have the trademark probably, you have the ingredients, you have the cognitive background and the innovation in your own kitchen, starting Laird Superfood and trying to enhance your coffee with optimal ingredients and, you know, maximal nutrient absorption. But then how do you learn to trust within the business world and relinquish some of the things that you guys create without that fear of what could go wrong?
Well, I think, you know, living in fear is never productive, but being, paying attention and keeping our eyes open and being realistic and practical. So what you do is you go, all right, what's going to be the most important thing? Guardrails against ingredients. So what you do is you pick your few things that you know you need to fortify, and then you have to just kind of go with the rest and see what happens. So it's really for us about the basics. Like right now we're going through packaging changes. Like this is secondary to me. We'll be involved in that process, but I don't need to put guardrails around, well, we can never change the packaging. So I think it's also putting guardrails and being really clear about what is actually the most important to you. But listen, weird stuff is happening all the time. Don't kid yourself. Like, you know, you hear things later or after the fact and you go, oh, I didn't know that, or I didn't see that coming. So there's no way to anticipate. And I'm not particularly sharky, and neither is Laird. So we're not going to be the quickest people to pick up on certain things. We might feel a vibration about somebody and be like, but we have a limited amount of experience that we're also learning on the fly. So you learn enough to go, all right, what area do I really need to protect? And also you make it clear. I always say it's not at any cost. So for example, our new CEO is incredible, but it's really clear. He knows that both Laird and I would walk away from the company if all of a sudden the ingredients, they decided somehow with shareholders and whatever to go a different way. Literally Laird would be like, I'm out. And it wouldn't matter, like, well, you have all this money on the table. It's like not at any cost.
The principle.
Right. So you have to be really smart about like not being an any cost person, like whatever it takes, because all of a sudden you'll be bending and flexing and compromising on things that you shouldn't be or don't want to be. So it's really, and it's like a relationship. It's like, just pick a couple things. Don't get crazy.
It's holding the standard, which I really appreciate, because that allows there to be trust, you know, as a consumer. Now the consumer sees Gabby and Laird using the product organically and legitimately, not just marketing something, which I think these days there's so many products that are smoke and mirrors, and you look at the ingredients and you're like, sucralose, that's the very first ingredient. That's probably not the best. And, you know, they're marketing things based on image and NIL, right? That's name, image, and likeness, which we're seeing in college sports now. But there's organic, like, authenticity. You guys use the product consistently. It serves a very positive purpose within your life. So it's not smoke and mirrors. I appreciate that.
Well, and also, you know, to remind people, sometimes to do it the right way can have its own challenges. But in the end, what are we defining as success? And Laird and I live together. And so in a way, it's also like having a part of your conscience on the outside of you looking at your face. So if I am, you know, all of a sudden getting tenderized and sort of all of a sudden I start compromising in areas I shouldn't, I have to lay next to somebody that, you know, is a great reminder to me about how do I want to live my life and what do I call a success? And, you know, are you going to do anything for $1? It's like, so it's weighing it out. It's weighing out all what's really genuinely important to you. And then you don't flinch. You can't be waffling around the fence, because that's not the place to be. What you have to do is say, this is just it. And then what happens is the temptation or whatever, it's just like, yeah, no, we don't do that. Like, that's just the way it is. So and you have to answer to yourself, to your conscience. And and also I have these kids here, and if I don't have to say, your dad and I, this is what we do, they are paying attention. And if at the end of this, my kids could somehow be like, you know what, they bugged me here and there and they didn't do this and that, but they really were trying, I'll take that.
That's so awesome. What's next for XPT? I've seen some photos of you on a pool deck. I've seen some hints of some cool things on the horizon. Briefly chatted with PJ and had an amazing conversation around the sensations with breath and, some upgrades to the app and whatnot.
Yeah. So exactly. We've upgraded. I think they put in 50 more breathing routines, and they are plans for kind of smaller centers. Some maybe just exposure training. So for people who are like, I have no room for a plunge or a sauna, just trying to make that more accessible for people. And then maybe, sort of more complex, where there could be the movement component and the breathing, and then the exposure, the heat and the ice, so people can actively recover. That's another arm of the business that is sort of rolling out at this point. And we'll have the experiences and certain things, which are just great for us to be hands-on, because no matter what, I think you need to connect with people and watch and pay attention and learn and see how people react. So you're sort of touching for real what you're talking about versus how it is only for you and your group.
Mm-hmm. Shifting that perspective for sure.
Yeah.
Chatting about exposure training, sauna and ice. I absolutely love it. I mean, I might even argue I'm a little bit addicted to it. It's the one place where there's not a lot of input. I get to sit there and be with me and deal with my breath and the positives and the negatives. And I really honor and appreciate that. And yes, it is challenging to have a sauna and a cold plunge at your house and, the maintenance and all the things that come with it. But I don't know, it's worth it to me. It's also great to share that with friends when they get to come over, and the dialogue in those very vulnerable, intimate moments of discomfort and anxiety management and leaning into your breath, and who you become on the other side of that is so freaking cool. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've called the sauna the truth barrel for 10 years because,
so
you're sweaty, you're in your, basically you're naked, and you only have 15 minutes. So let's get to it. So I think, there's a reason these are really ancient and old practices. We're not doing anything new. We're just lucky enough to find the way to put them into our modern day lives. And certainly the ice, we joke, the mood elevation, because you're just happy you didn't die, right? Like on some kind of going back to primal levels, and also meeting yourself. Hey, I don't really want to go in the ice, but I did. And I got to show up for myself and calm myself down in a positive, stressful environment that then will lend itself to not only my recovery and sort of the physiological things that happen, hormone regulation, but also just doing something I didn't really want to. I think if you can incorporate splashes of that here and there, it's pretty great. And I don't know most people that sort of always run to the ice and be like, I can't wait. There's a few nutters that do, but most of us are like, ugh, the ice, and still. So I think there's really something for that. And it goes back to appreciating, like, how fortunate am I even have access to this stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think that really summarizes today in a nutshell, Gabby. So much gratitude, so much appreciation. I just always enjoy crossing paths with you and Laird, just true examples of how to be more human. So thank you so much for connecting with me and sharing your authentic self.
Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are consistently communicating about these things, because the more that all of us can be connected and trying to help each other, just, make it a little easier. I think, movement and nutrition and life and busyness and COVID and all these things, I think when people realize that they're not alone, and that they're not supposed to fly out of bed every day and be ready to work out, but that most of us go through that, The fact that you're spending time and sharing that and accumulating information for people to support them, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. For those of you that enjoyed my conversation with Gabby today, check out her show, The Gabby Reece Show. Check out XPT and Laird Superfood. And Gabby, any last minute thoughts?
I think we're at a time that is very, there's a combativeness that gets, sort of presented out in the kind of traditional world. And if I just want to remind people that I don't actually think it's how most of us feel and think. And I think most of us are more in agreement and in harmony than not. And so sometimes if we can just practice that in our small life, that when we're all doing that, it will have an impact, because I do think it's a unusually combative and weird time. And so that's why it's like, hey, take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your friends, take care of your community. And if we can all just do that in these small little pockets, I feel that we can sort of weather through this.
I totally honor that for sure. For those of you listening or watching on YouTube, if you enjoyed my conversation with Miss Gabby Reece today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Thanks so much, Gabby. Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for Masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top Masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's NICHOLE at invictusathlete.com. Breathing, movement, circulation, digestion. What do all these body functions have in common? Our muscles. There are over 600 muscles in the human body that are responsible for supporting our daily activities. That's why your muscle health is incredibly important. On this podcast, I always discuss seeking our peak expression and striving to maximize our human potential. And so I try to share with you the top products that I find on the market. MyHMB is a clinically proven ingredient that has been shown to help build and maintain lean muscle mass, increase strength, improve recovery, and enhance body composition. Learn more about your muscle health at myhmb.com/Invictus. Once again, that's myhmb.com/Invictus. Enhance your muscle health and enhance your life.